So, hi Sue,
Hello, hi Claire.
welcome to the interview for the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. Thank you so much for coming along and answering some questions for us today about healing.
You're very welcome. I'm going to look forward to this,
Yeah,
sharing my animal experiences. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing it. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is because we don't feel that energy work is being properly portrayed, and that
Mm.
there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. So we just think it's nice to hear the stories of the people that are involved in the work, their ethics and morals, how they came about it, how they trained, and the work that they've done and the successes that they've had. So I'm
Right.
really looking forward to hearing your story. So you're Sue, and you're an energy worker, and we're going to hear more about how you do that shortly. But whereabouts are you based?
Based in West Sussex, near Horsham.
Fabulous. And I know that
Yeah.
that's a significant place name wise as well for what you do. So just tell me a little bit about how you work. Do you work one to one? Do you work online for those that don't know anything about it yet?
I do both. I prefer to work one to one. And obviously, if I'm working with animals, it's much better that I'm present with the animals. But I can do that online as well. And it's the same with people because I work with both. I can also work online with them, but I prefer one to one. And now COVID is all over and we've got back into the normality, whatever that might be. It's really good. Yeah. But
Mm.
being able to do it online is also an amazing thing that we can do too, because we can reach more people.
Yeah, and I think some people don't realize that energy work can be done across the internet.
No, yeah, yeah.
So tell me more about what you do currently then.
Um, I work mainly with animals, and people have varying reasons why they want to have healing. Usually it's sort of almost last resort. They've tried the vet and that hasn't produced what they would like. And then they get referred or somebody mentions healing to them and they ring me and I am able then to help them. It's not always helping in the way that an animal's condition will be cured or eased. Sometimes it's for the owner's benefit as well as the animal. So it's really a sort of three-way process when I'm working with animals. And then when I'm working with people, then obviously it's a one-to-one and probably like most other healers, helping them to look at themselves, see what things are going on emotionally, and then giving healing to help them to process that and push that through.
Mm. Fabulous. So tell me a bit about how you came to be a healer. Talk me through what's happened in your early life that's brought you to where you are today.
Okay, well, it started, I guess my with the animals, the healing is mainly with horses, although recently it's been with dogs. And my love of horses came through my grandfather. He used to take us up to pick apples and then feed them to the horses in the field at the back of the garden, his garden. Um, so my love of animals and nature started then. I was then a nurse. I became a nurse when I left school, and my aunt was a midwife, so I guess I sort of followed in her footsteps. And I nursed for a while and then had children. So we got four children. So I gave up nursing, and later I became interested in complementary therapy. So I decided I'd do a massage course. Um, and I did a massage course, and in between that, I was having trouble with my second son. He was very lively. He was the second child, and I had some back problems, and I needed some help. So I was recommended this lady who was a physio and a healer. And so that's where probably my healing journey really started. So then I moved on. I did the massage course, but I had to give that up because I hadn't learned to protect myself. So I ended up with other people's problems. They were fine, but I wasn't.
Mm.
And then I later went on and I became a craniosacral therapist. And that's where my healing journey really started, because I became interested in energy and how it worked. So from there, I got interested in energy. My daughter was working at an agricultural college in East Sussex. She was in the animal care department, and we had been working together running workshops on animal healing. We had done an animal healing training, and then we had also done Reiki. And she decided that we could run a BTEC professional diploma in animal healing course. So that's what we did. Very steep learning curve for me. I'd never taught. It was an amazing experience, but very stressful. And then she was ill. She went off to Australia with her Australian husband, and I carried on then doing workshops. So my healing journey has gone on for over 30 years now. And it's been pretty slow at the beginning. And then suddenly, I guess more recently, it's yes, it's really taken off.
Mm. So when you said you learned more about energy, what did you learn?
When in craniosacral therapy, it's very much you're not touching, you're not manipulating, or you're touching, but you're not manipulating, and you're following a flow of energy, which is very difficult to visualize that, have that sort of the feelings you have are amazing, but it's difficult to understand why you are feeling that. So I started to look into energy, and then I learned about how energy works, how expansive it is, how dynamic it is. And it started to make sense then with the cranial work. And I guess over time, I sort of dropped the cranial work and used the energy much, much more, and found my own way of healing. Although I had done Reiki, I don't always like to be put into a box. I like to be free to express my own ability and yeah, just to do what I want to do.
Mm. Fabulous. And so I think it's interesting as well that you were recommended twice people who happen to be healers as well. It's like your journey was always going to end up going that way.
Yeah, yeah. I'd always cared for people. So nursing, yes, when I look back, nursing, massage, craniosacral therapy, and then healing. Yeah, it's a very interesting journey.
So is it different? Is it different healing people than it is animals?
Yes, yes and no. I think when we're healing people, we know people, well, we think we know people because we are a person, we're the same species. With animals, you've got lots of different species, and so you have lots of different energies. And depending whether an animal's a prey animal or a predator, their energy fields are very different. And because my daughter and I ran the BTEC course, it was really interesting in the animal care department, where we had a whole selection of different animals, to have that experience of working with snakes or reptiles, or working with the fish or with the mammals. It was very, very different energies. So what it does, I think it makes you much more adaptable to sensing different energies. Yeah.
So what does that feel like?
it feels really and it's exciting. I love it because it makes you realize just how different everything is, but we're all the same.
Mm,
We're all one. We're all part of the same energy, and yet every species has its own different, specific, if you like, signature energy. Um, so as a healer, it makes you much more adaptable. And the other thing with animals is they're very, very present. There is no judgment there. There's no criticism, and they are just who they are and where they are. And I think for me, that's been a big learning um, curve in a way, because as much as we know each other as humans, we don't necessarily appreciate the depth of a human being unless we've really experienced it. And I think we can only do that by working with ourselves and allowing ourselves to grow and to become who we really are rather than who we are with all the experiences and baggage that we tend to carry.
mm. It's interesting you say that, because I was, when he was talking, I was thinking that I would have imagined that the main difference between animals and humans is that animals don't get in their own way.
They don't get in their own way, but they do have problems. Animals still have bad experiences and
Mm,
they can still block themselves. So, and they have emotions, they have all the things that we experience. So all of that is still there. So in some ways, some animals can, and I think it does depend on what sort of animal it is
yeah.
as well. Some animals seem more adaptive, and because we domesticate animals, then that puts them into a disadvantage. Not so much perhaps with dogs because they've lived with humans for such a long time, but for horses it can be very, very difficult because they're used to being out in the wild, in the field with lots of space, and we tend to put them in stables or in small enclosures, which pushes a lot of their survival buttons for some horses.
Mm. So speaking about survival, talk to me about Scruffy.
Right, Scruffy was a dog who he was 12 years old, and he was looked after by a lady and her husband, and they rescued him from the RSPCA. He had been in a flat with his companion dog, and the owner had committed suicide, which was very sad. Um, they had obviously been in the flat for a long time, so they were infested with fleas and they hadn't been out. So when the carers took them on, the other dog was not well anyway, and Scruffy was a little shut down, but he was sort of okay. And then last year, the other dog died from illness, and Scruffy was left on his own. And he became very, very withdrawn. Um, he didn't like to be touched. And I was asked to go in and help and see if I could help with what was being perceived as anxiety. So over a period of, I think it was 7 months, he had about 11 sessions. And during those sessions, he would pace up and down in the room. He would settle down. He wouldn't look at me very much. He would tend to be very withdrawn in himself. But over that time, I saw him start to open up. He had a damaged ear, um, which during those sessions, it became evident that he had a problem with his head and his neck. So at some point, I suspect he had some trauma there. And I suspect too that he had pain, like a headache, something like that, that obviously was there all the time. So over that period of time, he got better. He relaxed more. He was much more able to cope with what he was trying to cope with. And his owners noticed that he liked to be touched a little bit more, and they could stroke him and cuddle him, and to a certain degree. He'd walk off if he'd had enough. But the one thing he never did with me was he would walk up and down, and then he'd look at me, and then he'd go back to bed. He never ever came up to me, and I sat on the floor, so he could if he wanted to.
Mm.
And just at the end of those sessions I had with him, he seemed a lot more steady. He had an unsteady gait. He'd tend to wobble when he walked, and his gait became steadier. But then on that last session, he became very unsteady. He was almost like he was going backwards. But while I was sitting on the floor, he did come up to me, which was the first time he had really come up to me. And his energy was very, very heavy. It was just not how it had been.
Mm.
And I think I knew then that he was wanting to go. He'd had enough. I think he'd got to that point where he was more relaxed and able to allow himself to go, if that makes sense. So when I left, this was very emotional. I walked out of the front door and turned around to say goodbye. And he came up to the door and he licked my hand. Now, he would never, ever have done that. Sorry, that even makes me feel a bit emotional.
Mm.
And it was as if he was just saying thank you and goodbye. And indeed, a little bit later, a few days later, the carers decided that it was time. They felt it was time for him, and he was put to sleep.
Oh.
So for me, it wasn't about helping him to get better. It was helping him to become more comfortable within himself, and also for the owners to feel that they had done everything they could for him. And I think all round it was just a nice scenario and an ending.
Mm. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. And I think that's one of the things that I hadn't expected, was that it's not necessarily going to be all about, because the word healing insinuates that it's about, getting better.
Yeah.
But getting better doesn't always mean physically.
No, no, indeed. And a lot of it is very emotional for
Mm.
animals. It's very emotional. And I think it's the same for us too, as humans. A lot of our conditions and our problems that we want help with are emotionally based.
Mm.
So it's important to acknowledge that.
What do you wish everybody knew?
I wish everybody knew that the problems that they carry within themselves can be changed, and that in changing them, life can become much easier, can become much more productive. Our energy can be so much better. And I feel really strongly that all healers who are doing healing should be working with themselves, because my experience of that is just incredible, of working with myself and seeing my ability to heal expand and change, constantly changing. And it's just wonderful. And it's without really trying. You're helping yourself and you're helping those people and animals that you're helping too. So it's like it's a whole circle. We're all connected. So if I can help myself, I can help others.
Mm.
Yeah, and the energy is very, very different.
So I picked up a change there with you as well when you were saying about starting with yourself. and the work that you've done for yourself. Because I heard that from the last person I interviewed as well, said the same
Mm,
thing, that they quite often recommend people do at least the first part of Reiki or similar, um, to help themselves to learn not just about it, but about looking after themselves too. So I think it's interesting that you've mentioned the same thing there.
yeah,
What ways
yeah.
has it helped you?
Having mentoring has been my biggest help. I mean, in the past, I still have healing myself, um, and I've had other therapists too. But more recently, um, I've seen that if I can shift some of the things that affect me, my behaviors, then it opens up another door. And when I go through that door, it's amazing. You know, there's like an expansion, another expansion of energy, and another expansion of energy. So, and it's a journey you just want to keep going on because it feels great. It's sometimes hard going through that door,
Mm.
but once you've gone through it, yeah, and you feel lighter, um, and it's easier to deal with problems that perhaps you didn't deal with originally very well because you were reacting all the time to triggers and certain scenarios. So, and having an understanding of how that all works through having the mentoring has been amazing for me. Um, and I would recommend anybody trying to find a good person that they can be mentored by, just to reflect back. And the animals were amazing too. They were my greatest teachers, the horses, because horses are they have a big energy field and they are very, very present. They don't necessarily know us like dogs do because dogs live in our home. So horses only see us when we go to them, and they're outside most of the time. And they showed me that ego certainly is something that shouldn't be that should be pushed aside, and to be able to not judge not judge ourselves when we're doing healing with them. We need to be just present, grounded, very grounded, and having an open space and just being with them. I used to teach grounding with on our workshops in front of the horses, and I was always amazed at how often people thought they were grounded, but they weren't, because the horses would act as a feedback. And as the person grounded themselves, the moment they came out of their grounding, because they went into their head and had a thought, the horses would react immediately and come out of their space.
Wow.
And it was just truly awesome to watch it. And then I
It's
had
not just
egos
you're
too.
healing the horses, but that they're doing something back.
Yeah, yes.
Blimey. That's really amazing. I didn't realize that. I thought it was you was going and healing horses that were poorly or something.
Yeah, no, I was doing that too, but I was
Okay.
also using the horses to
Mm.
teach people how to ground properly. Yeah,
Wow.
so they were just an added support team. I always call them my teaching support team. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to explore further, and you said about finding a good mentor, um, how might somebody go about that and be protected? I imagine that there's going to be good and bad. What kind of things would they need to look out for or be aware of or have in the back of their mind, maybe?
I don't know. That's a very difficult difficult thing to answer.
Yeah.
It's I think if you can see somebody, a lot of people are on Facebook, um, and YouTube. If you can look at people and see how they are, how they present themselves, and go with the energy and the feeling that you have in your heart towards that person is perhaps the first step in looking for somebody or trying to find somebody. And then I guess if it was me, I would then phone them, contact them, and then have some sort of conversation. So then you have it's the next step closer in, if you like, to that person. And having a session to test it out and see whether that really is the way you want to go. I'm very lucky because my mentor happens to be my daughter. So it's been easy for me. Yeah, well, we already have a connection, but it's a very interesting connection because it is still client practitioner relationship.
So are there qualifications? Is there anything like that that somebody would need to bear in mind, or is that less important? And is the connection more important, do you think?
I think the connection is more important. I mean, qualifications are obviously a bonus, but maybe sometimes qualifications can become more important than actually the person who is the practitioner.
Mm.
And the one question I would ask them is, how much work do you do with yourself?
Mm.
Because
Yeah,
if
I
they
like
haven't, and if they don't do the work themselves, then I would try and find somebody else.
mm. It seems to me that that's really key, is that you're doing the energy work with yourself as well as with others.
Yes.
Do you have a message for any cynics?
I think go and try. Go and see. Instead of saying it doesn't work, there's a good book which is called Why Woo Woo Works by David Hamilton. Um, it's an excellent book. It looks at all aspects of healing and backed up by research. He's done his homework very well. And I would recommend that book to certainly anybody who was skeptical. And then I would say, go and try it. Pick one of those things in the book and go and try it. And I have actually given that book to somebody who I know who's a little skeptical. So we'll see.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, I think I might have to look at that. I've not heard of that book before, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with somebody who's very skeptical of everything, a little bit woo-woo. And we brought up the subject of the placebo effect, and whether that's because obviously that's been scientifically proven, and is widely accepted in the NHS and in science worlds as being something that works. And I was like, if you feel that you need something more than you're getting, same thing as you, why not just try it? And if you can't make it work logically for you in your head, then that doesn't really matter so long as it works, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I kind of was saying to them, if you really can't be open-minded enough to think that there might be something in it, because I know acupuncture and even massage and things like that never used to be widely accepted and are now much more scientifically understood and widely accepted. And I imagine that the energies and energy work will probably at some point also be, we'll discover something and we'll go, oh, it was there all along, they were right all along.
Yeah.
um and so I think there's a real space for people who work in the way that you do, to be able to expand and be heard, and just for more people to understand that this exists. Whether you need to believe in it or not doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. And I think also just starting at the bottom, if you are trying to get the word out there for healing or for your own practice, that make things simple.
Mm.
Healing sometimes gets very complicated, and there's so many different types of healing, and we're all coming from the same source.
Mm.
That's how I see it. And it's good that we have different ways of healing because that suits different people, but we still need to present it in a very, very simple way, and a way that has meaning for that person or for people. We all will read children's books, which are simple. We will still enjoy a child's book because it's written for a child. And I do think sometimes that healing material needs to be written for the child so that we can read it and understand it, because it's rather elusive, I feel.
Mm.
Um, and people need something to grasp onto to have a meaning for them, and having a trust, I suppose, to some degree.
Mm.
So keeping it simple has always been one of my mottos, and not giving too much information all at once, because this stuff is mind blowing if you've never had any contact with it.
Mm. Be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I completely agree, because even not just in energy work circles, but in anything, if you're going to teach somebody about something, the temptation is to, and I've done it in the past, is to overload with information to show how much you know, and or because you're excited at how much there is. We've been on a journey of discovery that somebody else hasn't, and it can be tempting to throw that all in at once. But yeah, I was reading something the other day that was saying that if you want to be good at teaching, you want to teach well, then you need to be able to teach it to children. And so you've just
Yeah,
said
exactly.
exactly the same thing, and there is
Yeah.
research behind that as
Yeah.
well, which is
Right.
interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And we've all been there, haven't we? Of being so excited about what we've learned and wanting to share that. And I was in that place once as well. But you just learn over time that actually, no, people need less information so that they can um, consider it and think about it, and it doesn't become overwhelming. Yeah.
Go on their own discovery journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking when you was talking about the how energy, the energy, and when I was asking about skeptics, and it also reminded me of a different conversation I've had with other people, which is because I'm not trying to persuade people that it's right or wrong. I'm still discovering things for myself as
Mm.
well, and have come from a place of cynicism. And so I'm interested in how we marry the two together to make it work. And but I've thought about, like, some there's some places where I've been looking to rent a house, for instance, and you go and visit houses, and some of them you're going and they're perfectly adequate, like they tick all the right boxes logically, but there's just
Yes.
something about the place, and you just go, it
Mm.
doesn't feel right. The energy isn't right. And I think most people can get on board with having had a similar experience with something like that. And that's, when if I'm talking about things like this and I reach any serious opposition, I just ask them if they've ever experienced anything where something just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
um how did they know that wasn't energy? What, can they prove it? And all of the questions that you get back at them, because we really seem to struggle these days with the intangible, and I
Yeah.
think that's a real shame.
Yes. And I don't know what the answer is for that, other than taking things really back down to something very simple and something that um, people can understand. And now we do have a lot of scientific research out there to back up healing having an effect, if not that it works, but certainly having an effect. So therefore, um, people tend to hook onto the science stuff, don't they?
Mm.
Because for them, then it's real and it's proven, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Um, but as far as they're concerned, that's good. So I think now, because I found this a lot with the vets are very suspicious. I don't know if it's suspicion or about, healing, and they tend to just ignore it, poo-poo it, or whatever. And if you present them with a scientific paper that has been written scientifically, then they tend to take a little bit more notice. And we had this experience with a vet who was treating a dog that had cancer, and we asked permission to give healing to that particular dog, and he refused the healing initially and said that he was concerned that if we gave it healing, it would make the cancer worse, which was fair enough. So we then sent him scientific papers, which were science experiments based on mice that had cancer. And the results were obviously very positive. And in the end, he gave permission, and he said, yes, okay, well, I can see that, so it allayed his fears, I suppose, that, it was going to interfere with his treatment of that particular dog. But it was just very interesting that, if you can produce something that is scientific, then it's more acceptable.
Why do you do healing?
Because I feel it's my purpose. It's my journey. I've always been a carer. Whatever I've done has been helping other people. I love it. The whole journey of working with myself, working with other people, and most of all working with animals has just been incredible. And I can't ever see myself stopping. I wouldn't want to stop, because for me personally, I've come out of a fear-based life where I've had lots of fears there, which have stopped me doing things. And I've seen how moving all of that stuff has enabled me to really embrace the healing, embrace looking after other people, and working with animals where there's a different relationship. I just love it, and I couldn't live without it. Well, I could. I'd have to if I had to. No, I really enjoy. Yeah, I just love it.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I would just, yes, there is one thing I'd just like to add, and this is something I found that have helped people working with humans, which I have learned from working with animals, and that is energetic space that we give, and that we create when we're working with a human. When I work with horses, they taught me that the energetic space changes when I'm working with them. And when things weren't ever shifting properly, or weren't shifting, it meant that I needed to move and make that energetic space much, much bigger.
Right.
And this was something I found really useful then when I started working with people. I used that, and it just helped the body, because I guess I have to speak for myself, but I must have been just sitting together with that client or patient or person, and being in one space originally. And then when I learned to open the space even more, it allowed much more healing changes and healing flow, energy flow to take place. So I wanted to share that because I think it's really a useful thing, a useful tip.
Yeah.
Space is amazing if you can open it and close it. Yeah, when you're working. So Yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank
Yeah, it's
you
been
for
lovely hearing about your journey and how it works and what your thoughts are on it. And yeah, fascinating to listen to. And I hope everybody enjoys listening to it as well as much as I did.
okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you
much.
so much. Thank you.